Welcome to the Blue Lake Casino and the Sapphire Palace on behalf of California Cannabis Voice Humboldt. Thanks again for showing up. My name's Andy. I'm the outreach coordinator for CCVH. And as you probably know, we have an esteemed panel of speakers that are going to be entertaining you and informing you tonight. And first up, I'd like to introduce the executive director, the Sultan of Samoa Softball, executive director of CCVH, Richard Marks.
Why, thank you, Andy, but actually I'm the softball king. But my name is Richard Marks. I'm the executive director of California Cannabis Voice Humboldt. Some other people will recognize me as elected official. I'm with the Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District. I'm the 4th Division elected commissioner, and I'm also the board president. Other people might know me from North Coast Rail Authority. I'm a director on the North Coast Rail Authority, and I'm also the president of Mad River Softball Association. So every summer that comes up like this is my chance to babysit 500 adult softball players, and that will go until October. But as far as California Cannabis Voice, I do work as a political consultant, and this last year I was approached by people from California Cannabis Voice, the California division. There was a lawyer out of San Francisco, Matt Kuman, and a nightlife organizer in San Francisco, Terrence Allen. And they ended up meeting me with Luke Bruner, one of the founders that is actually from Wonderland Nursery. And Luke had done some work on a campaign that I was working on that was successful. I've been pretty fortunate as a political consultant. I've won over 20 elections, and I've only lost a couple. And unfortunately, those couple was me for supervisor. But as far as California Cannabis Voice was concerned, they hired me as a consultant. And they asked me if I had any problem with cannabis. Well, I grew up in Humboldt County, so I had no problem. I have enough people, friends of mine that are involved in the farms. I've had family involved in the farms. And unfortunately, I've had some family that has been busted. So that's always an uncomfortable situation. But they said, what a great opportunity. What we'd like to do is try to legalize cannabis farming in Humboldt County to a certain level that everybody could be comfortable with. And the way we strategize to do that is with a county ordinance, and actually use an initiative process if we had to. And that is, we wanted to build something that everybody could agree upon. So in cannabis, you can't always get everybody to agree upon much, but we were able to get 35 stakeholders from the environmental agencies, from other agencies like the planning department in Humboldt County. We had 2 board of supervisors there, and we had people in the medical marijuana as far as doctors. And we also had the room full of 35 people, and then we hired a facilitator from Berkeley to come in and to actually sit with the stakeholders and come up with language that they thought would be good for Humboldt County, and Humboldt County is centric. And so that happened. That was back in October. Then we've had many iterations of a ordinance that would look good for Humboldt County, and this next week we'll probably start out the rollout process of putting out this initiative. And so it's been pretty exciting. In a year's time, it's been really, this has been a movement that's been incredible as far as California Cannabis Voice is concerned. If anybody notices in the paper, we're very relevant. And in the media, we've been very relevant. We've been in the San Francisco Chronicle, the Sacramento Bee, Press Democrat, of course, up here in local media, we've had a lot of press, and that's been created organically. People in Humboldt County, they want to be talking about what's relevant in cannabis. And so we have had an organizing effort where we have went up to the hills and talked to people, and we've brought people down to comfortable places to talk, and actually we've been very successful. We have a list of, it's nearing 1,000 growers that are up there, and so we've been able to help network. When people are talking about cleaning the environment, I said, well, we're already on that roll right now. In the last 5 months, there's been more permits taken out of the county for certifying water and other issues. That last 5 months, more in the last 5 years. And that's been the effort of the growers. That's been an effort, of people coming together and coming out of the shadows and going through this process. And as far as this organization, back in December, we decided that we wanted to be completely controlled by Humboldt County interest. And so what we did is created a new nonprofit, California Cannabis Voice Humboldt, which is a nonprofit, 501c4, and which is a social welfare program, because we're helping farmers, small farmers, become legitimate. And the process has been really, I've been telling people, you don't understand, this has been legislation on the run, because we have made a lot of headway real quick. This organization is 1 year old. We've had the lieutenant governor come up with the our Jared Huffman, our congressman, Jim Wood, our assemblyman. You'll never hear of any history in Humboldt County where you've had those three people in the same room at the same time, ever. But we've went further than that. We had 2 Board of Equalization members come up and go ahead, and we've taken them all out on tours to farms to see what's the reality out there, instead of just hearing what's going on and actually listening person to person. So we've been very fortunate. We have the ears. We might not have the mouths of the politicians, but at least everybody's listening, and they're waiting for our language of our initiative ordinance. And hopefully we'll have something that we can bring forward, and if we can push it through the Board of Supervisors in Humboldt County, then we're going to this is going to be a very successful process. And I'm just proud of all the new board members. We have actually 14 board members on the nonprofit. And we have, besides myself as staff, we have an executive director assistant is Danielle Burkhart. She's back there. And we have a community outreach person. There's Danielle back there. And Andy Powell's our outreach coordinator, and he seems to have disappeared somewhere. And there he is. And with that, I want to go ahead and let Andy push on the program. I just want to thank everybody who showed up, and I want to thank everybody who's been involved in California Cannabis Voice Humboldt. And I'm just hoping for a more successful year this next year, and just keep on building the program, because sales and delivery, we need to address that in the future also.
Again, Richard Marks, our executive director. So quickly want to let everybody know, we're going to be hearing from our speakers now, and we're going to then have a brief question and answer session after all of them have spoken. You're welcome to let your applause out after each one of them speaks, however. And I want to move on right now to Praj White of Manhard Consulting. He's been involved with us for a while now. He comes to a lot of our meetings, and I'm glad to have him kind of working with us a lot. So if you don't mind, a round of applause for Praj White, again, of Manhard Consulting.
Thank you. So my name is Praj White, and I'm a local civil engineer, and I work for Manhard Consulting. I was at that first stakeholder meeting that Richard mentioned, and it was quite amazing to see all of the folks to come together. And over the past year, I've been able to be part of working with their policy vision, and it's been amazing to meet the senators, the lieutenant governor, the state representatives, and see everybody come together with kind of a vision of moving forward. And we think of what does regulation look like, and what is all of this talk about. And I think that really it's about recognizing that what is going on is really, it's farming and it's agriculture to start with, and that's the issue that has been at hand here. And as we look across the North Coast region, to be compliant with farming in rural Northern California, there's issues with forestry, California Department of Forestry for clearing trees. There's issues with state water rights and the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board. We go through Department of Fish and Wildlife, the County Planning Department, County Building Department, and all of these issues seem overwhelming, and there's a reason that those departments have written regulations over the years. And the true message, instead of I'm being regulated and there's all of these issues, what I see is, at the basis of it, it says, we need to protect the resources on the North Coast. We need to look at, ways to be stewards to the rivers, ways to be stewards to the land, how to have safe living conditions, how to have safe working conditions for folks. And so even though all those agencies, and there's a lot of red tape and paperwork through it, the real message is take care of your land, be responsible, and really the basis of all the rules and regulations are basically going to say, if you're following all the regulations that exist today, you're going to find yourself with an opportunity as an ordinance for the county comes forward or the state legislation comes forward. So even though you have an amazing group within CCVH doing outreach and talking to people and spreading the word and messaging everywhere, and you have the government officials and regulators being involved in looking at it, it really isn't what they're going to do for you. It's on your land. It's up to you to take care of your land and be in compliance with those base rules that really have a good message behind them. And when you get to that point, this opportunity may come forward. And as you hear in the past history has been, marijuana growing is bad, and there's issues on the streams, and there's issues in forest clearing, and there's all these illegal activities. And really, it doesn't need to be that way. Step back, and there's myself, there are other consultants in the area, and there's a lot of help, and there's a lot more help coming to help folks follow and understand there's a rule and there's red tape, but behind that's a real message of something that you need to protect and take care of. So if you reach out and you embrace that, at this point, I'm not sure the time frame of all of the state and county regulations coming forward, but you can prepare yourself by being a steward and being ahead of that curve. And we're really, as an organization, trying to reach out and educate and help people get there. And I really think that as the growers and the landowners of Humboldt County and the North Coast become responsible and recognize these rules aren't there to bring somebody out to get you caught at what you're doing. The rules are there to bring folks out and help you be compliant and be a steward to your North Coast and the properties. So with that, the message is, you guys step forward and do your part. This organization, the government, the agencies, the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board is writing a regulation for marijuana cultivation. So, right, and Connor will speak to that in a minute, but the idea is that, there's a structure for folks to follow. And instead of being in a gray zone, are you between something you should do or not, it's becoming more clear. There's a lot of rules and regulations. They apply to you already, regardless of if you're doing cannabis. And I think that's the message. And if you welcome it and get ahead of that curve, I really think you're ultimately, all of these folks can put together rules and regulations, but it's going to come down to, I think I hear the numbers in Humboldt County, there's 10,000 properties maybe cultivating, and in the North Coast region, maybe 30,000. And this program's going to be successful if the people on the land step forward and embrace it and join that program and do their part to be stewards. So really I'm trying to support this group and help move things forward, looking out for everybody's interest, but really it's going to come down to the landowners embracing it and doing their part. So thank you guys very much.
Thanks again. That's Praj White of Manhart Consulting. Quickly before I pass it off to Connor over here, who I'll introduce, I want to take a quick moment to thank Angeline, who's around. She's our event coordinator for putting much of this together, and Sequoia Hudson as well. On the ribbons than I could have, I can tell you that. And as well, I want to thank the board of CCVH, who I work for. It's a pleasure to work with, and many of them are here tonight. I want to thank them for doing everything they do. They work a lot harder and a lot cheaper than I do. So thanks for coming, and they can answer your questions later tonight too. So now I want to get on to Connor McFarland, who we're grateful to have last minute came up from Santa Rosa. He's on the State Water Resources Control Board. and made it up here again last minute. We're glad to have him. So round of applause for Connor, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Sandy. And thanks to California Cannabis Voice Humboldt for having the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board here this evening. It's been a process to this point as we've been developing our regulatory measure and the ability and openness that has been afforded our agency and the collaboration that we've been able to have with a variety of individuals as we've brought this forward has been appreciated, and hopefully will continue. As stated, I work for the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, and it's a California State Environmental Protection Agency. My colleague is on the white this year with me this evening as well. I just want to ask a question to start. How many of you have heard of the Water Board before tonight? All right, so how many of you heard of the Water Board before 5 months ago? That's good. That's pretty good. And you're all probably aware then that we have a draft permitting order to address water quality and resource impacts for cannabis cultivation. How many of you heard one of us talk before? About half of you. Okay, so some of this is going to be a repeat. It's technical information that I'm going to get into, so I've got somewhat of a script here, so just kind of bear with me for those folks that haven't. Hopefully this will be informative. I just want to give you a little bit of a background on who we are. We were formed in the State Water Resources Control Board was formed in the 1950s, and we implement the California Water Code as brought forth by the Porter-Cologne Act in 1969, which provided a kind of backbone framework for the Federal Clean Water Act, which was enacted in 1973. And that authority from the Clean Water Act is delegated to our agency as well. Our agency has three main divisions, the Division of Water Rights, the Division of Drinking Water, and the Division of Water Quality. I work as an environmental scientist for the Division of Water Quality for the North Coast Regional Board. The State Water Board is broken up into 9 different regions. We're in the North Coast region. Our region extends from the Oregon border down to Tomales Bay. Basically, anything that drains into the ocean in that region is our jurisdiction. That is from the Smith River down to the Russian River. So we're responsible for protecting beneficial uses of California's water, like fisheries, recreation, and water supplies, and the water quality necessary to support it. We do this through adopting standards, making scientific assessments, regulating activities and land uses that may affect water quality, and taking enforcement when necessary. We principally do this through developing and implementing permitting programs for specific types of activities and industries based on the nature of activities and the impacts to water quality that they may have on our water resources. Some things that I'd like to highlight that our agency does. We have groundwater cleanups and protection, point source discharges, which you can think of as like coming through a specific pipe. Things stormwater, wastewater treatment plants, power plants, other industrial users. We have in our groundwater cleanups program, we've got underground storage tanks, gas stations, dry cleaners, and then we have a well-established non-point source program. This regulates discharges from other land disturbance and land management activities, including forestry, work in streams, rural roads, and agriculture. Most of the streams in the North Coast region has a sediment and temperature impairment, and most of those impairments are caused by non-point source discharges. That's kind of the landscape of our region. We're a pretty rural region. There's not a lot of major point source industry. It's mostly non-point source that we look at. We have a number of existing non-point source permitting programs. The next permit that's coming out is nothing new. It's part of what we do already. Right now our office is developing agricultural permits for vineyards and orchards, Easter lily bulbs on the Smith River Plains, agriculture in the Tule Lake area, grazing on Forest Service lands, and the cannabis waste discharge permit. We also regulate timber as well. Our approach is four-pronged. We have a draft permit that we are coming up with. The permit is on schedule to be considered for adoption on August 13th. It is designed to address waste discharges resulting from cannabis cultivation, and it's a pathway for compliance to our water quality regulations. We're cooperating with other agencies in this platform, including Fish and Wildlife, the Water Board, and we're doing education and outreach. This is part of it here. As well as with all of our other programs, we have a progressive enforcement policy. I kind of want to focus on today's presentation. This is kind of rambling a little bit, and I understand this is technical, sorry. I just want to focus on kind of what the meat of the order is for people who haven't heard it before. We're focusing on ensuring best management practices are being used on the landscape. That's what we care about. We want to see the roads are constructed and maintained properly. We want to see riparian areas protected. We want to see that, you know, the soil and spoils that you have from your activities are managed properly. We want to see waste and fertilizers managed properly. We're just looking for things to be managed correctly. We know that a lot of you folks are already doing a lot of that, and we're appreciative of it as an agency. And we know that there are some folks that need some guidance on that. And so this permit is a framework for providing some of that guidance. Even some of the folks that think that they're doing the things the right way, well, there could be a couple of things maybe that could use a little bit of improvement done, and that's part of what this permit is for. Our order is structured so that there's different levels of oversight depending on the needs of the site. So our order is a tiered structure. There's 3 tiers. Tier 1 is a low threat to water quality. Tier 2 is a slightly higher threat to water, or a higher threat to water quality. And Tier 3 is an operation that has an immediate threat to water quality and requires cleanup. So any site will fall into any one of those 3 categories. In any of these tier levels, there's going to be conditions that everybody needs to adhere to, such as maintenance of roads, like I said, stream crossings, having specific buffers depending on the tier level, spoils handling and water storage and irrigation, all those standards. Basically, we want everybody to look at what's going on at the farm. Talk what Raj was saying, that, you know, it's on the individual to be looking and coming to compliance with these regulations. The Tier 1 characteristics, I mean, I can get into the specifics. I guess do people want me to get into the specifics? Yeah. Okay, then I'm going to get into the specifics. All right, people care, and I'll do that. I don't want to be up here boring everybody. And this is all in a 25-page draft permit, which is on that back table. If anybody wants to take one home with them, you're more than welcome to. I put about 20 so it's pretty comprehensive. Saw some big eyes there. Tier 1 characteristics include a 200-foot vegetative buffer between cultivated areas and surface waters. No cultivation is occurring on slopes steeper than 35%. Cumulative cultivation area is not more than 2,000 square feet, and there are no surface water diversions between May 15th and October 31st. That's to protect flows for fisheries and other public trust needs. If there's insufficient flow, then in-stream uses cannot be fully supported. So it's really important that we have and maintain flow to support beneficial uses. In Tier 2, your site may or may not meet all of the standard conditions that I kind of laid out before, or necessarily all the characteristics of Tier 1. So you might be within 200 feet of a riparian area. There are some limitations to Tier 2, such as you have to be a minimum 100 feet back from a Class 1 or Class 2 stream, and 50 feet back from a Class 3 or intermittent stream. I can talk more about classifications of streams if people want. In both of these tiers, there's an enrollment process. but there will be another step of developing a water resources protection plan, kind of a, call it a farm plan if you wanted to, in Tier 2, which is a comprehensive overview of your property. It's basically formalizing that look that you're doing at your property, understanding those things that you need to do, taking the standard conditions that we've laid out and applying those in a plan so that you're making an effort, a concerted effort to address those issues and make sure that you're in compliance with those with the regulation. Tier 3 has all of the same requirements as a Tier 2 site, but has some larger issues that need to be addressed more immediately. Tier 3 will likely need to work with a licensed professional to get their site back into compliance through cleanup and/or restoration. And this tier will require direct oversight by our agency, which is different from our proposal for Tiers 1 and 2. Tiers 1 and 2 may be able to perform most of their requirements through a third party if they wish, and assuming that there isn't a third party that's been approved through our agency to do that work. This order allows for third parties to propose programs to the Water Board to assist in fulfilling aspects of the order. Third-party programs must be approved by our executive officer to participate in any of these activities. And currently, given that we have not adopted the waiver yet, we have not approved any third-party programs, and we will post the names of approved third parties as they become available on our website. But up until that time that we approve them, there are not currently any approved third parties to be managing any cases at this point in time. So we're working to develop a framework right now to allow for third parties to do that process. It's a process that we're working with collaboratively as well, and it's in development. As the program develops, we're going to be working to help individuals who are looking for guidance on how to maintain compliance with that program. Our agency is a public agency. Our mission is to protect water quality and resources for everybody. So if there's any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to get in contact with us. I'm a public servant, so is a donut. That's what we've chosen. We're public servants, so we're here to serve the public. There's contact information in the back, little third strips of slip of paper. It has information to where you can find the waiver online. It has information for the Division of Water Rights if you have specific water rights questions. I know a lot of you will probably have water rights questions for me. I work for the Division of Water Quality and not water rights. I will try, if I can, to answer some of those questions, but my best backbone is to point to that slip of paper and say there's a website and a phone number, and unfortunately I do not represent that division. So I just want to put that out there. But what you can do right now is look at our draft order to understand what we're requiring. The appendix offers some general guidelines for site improvement. Seek out other guidance as well and be proactive. Talk to your neighbors and try and come up with solutions that can work on a watershed-wide scale as well. Think about forming road associations and watershed groups so that some of the issues can get addressed as a community as opposed to individually. It's always easier, I think, to solve problems as a community on a community level. It's probably why we're all gathered up here this evening. Just so that you know, if you're in the Eel River watershed, the Eel River Recovery Project provides is a program that we is a grantee through our agency to provide technical assistance in the Eel River, as well as we are working with the Mendocino County Resource Conservation District to develop a comprehensive best management practices guide for cultivation. So we are working through other arms as well to provide different levels of assistance that are not necessarily directly through our agency. So look through those avenues as well for guidance. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out. And I'll be around to answer questions. I think we'll have a question and answer session. But anyways, It was a long time, I'm sure. Pass the microphone on.
So before we continue on, I just want to get people to start thinking about questions you might have at the panel a little bit. There's always that awkward dead silence of like 20 seconds when we open it up for questions, which is fine. But if you start thinking about questions now, I want to also quickly thank Andrew McFarland of Access Humboldt. He's the guy back here filming stuff, recording stuff. So now we have, you may recognize, former district attorney here of Humboldt County.
Seemed like a lot.
No, probably happening in private practice again. And if you were down in Garberville on the 29th for the public forum with Lieutenant Governor and Congressman and Assembly member, you may recognize him from also the Blue Ribbon Commission on Marijuana Policy. Paul Gallegos, moonlighting, the best kind of life to be in on that commission. So Paul Gallegos, right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark, Andy, and California Cannabis Voice. I do really want to acknowledge the work that they're doing, but the vision, the courage of doing that, and the importance of everyone participating in this, because the one thing I have learned over those 12 years that I was district attorney, and my experience in politics, is that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And that's really where Humboldt County is. The question is whether when marijuana becomes legalized, if it becomes legalized, what will be the impact on the people here and our lifestyle? And I think those are big issues that we need to be concerned about, that we need to be involved in, and that you need to reach out to address the issues in our community with your neighbors, but also form committees like this or groups like this so that your voice can be at that table, and it will be heard through them and through other organizations or elected officials. And you're minimizing the risk of being on the menu. So I'm going to put some real quick notes. We have 15 minutes. I want to be brief. I know there's a question and answer period afterwards. My wife and I, Joan Gallegos, moved here in 1998. Thank you for being here, but her also. She is my partner in life and my partner in practice. We practice down in Los Angeles County. I brought her up here one weekend, and she loved this area so much, she said, let's move. And she worked for a medical malpractice insurance defense firm in Los Angeles, and I had my own practice. And about 2 or 3 months later, we moved up here, opened our own business. We knew no one. And if you think that's insane, you're kind of right. But it turned out all right. And I tell you that because we moved to Humboldt County because we chose to be here. We love Humboldt County. Humboldt County opened its arms to us. It enabled us to prosper. It's a home for our children. It's providing education to our children. And we are completely invested in this community. And that's one of the reasons why I ran for district attorney. I have been practicing law for over 20 years. Before being district attorney, I practiced both state and federal litigation. And then I served as community district attorney for 3 terms, which is 12 years. And I tell you that because for over 20 years, I've been suing people and prosecuting people to get them to follow the law or protect them from people that are trying to make them comply with the law, get the state to comply with its own laws. And I've also, the entire time I was district attorney, the only district attorney that I know in the country that was an open advocate for the legalization of marijuana. Thank you. Now is an opportunity for us to fix the problem. I see now as an opportunity for me not to sue people, but to help people get compliant. There are many people here that are trying to help this community and the people in this community change their business practices for a post-legalization world that you're going to live in. Marijuana, for 12 years I've been talking to people, I still go places, and I hear elected officials that wave their hands and say, the problem with the Compassionate Use Act, the Medical Marijuana Program Act, is that we have an industry that's not regulated. And when I hear that, then I start wringing my hands, because the truth is the industry of marijuana cultivation is regulated. It's as deeply regulated as every other industry, but the agencies and the legislators and everyone else has failed to make the shift to enforce those regulations, as to continue to try to say it's criminal, it should be criminal, and enforce the old criminal laws. But if you're growing marijuana, guess what? You have all sorts of rules and regulations that apply to you. Everything with the water, you've heard the water, all the regulations. If you're using water, you're pulling it out of the rivers, creeks, streams, guess what? You need to get a permit. That's regular. That water belongs to all of us, not just you. You have a piece of property, you're cutting down trees, you need to get permits to cut down those trees. You're tearing roads in. If you have a road that's crossing a stream, you need permits. Why? Because that creates sedimentation that flows into the rivers, it kills fish, it kills animals, it impacts all of us. And frankly, you should be free to pursue your life activities, but not at the cost of everyone else. So that's the responsibility that goes with being a member of this community. So it is a regulated industry. Do not be confused. The problem is it's an industry that has not made that shift yet, where they reach out to trying to find out. If you're producing foodstuffs that go into our community for consumers, be it edibles or whatnot, the Sherman Food Act regulates that. Yeah, it's crazy. If you have employees, and many people do, they're growing marijuana, they bring people up to help them harvest. Guess what? They're not independent contractors, more than likely under the law. And you need to have workers' comp insurance on them. If they get injured, why should the people of the state of California have to pay for that? It should be you as a responsible business person to take care of your employees. Make sure that your product that you're putting in the market is safe for the consumer. That it weighs what you say it weighs, that it does what you say it does. And as a consumer, we have the right to expect that. If you go to the store, you want safe food. If you're putting something in the market, that consumer has a right to expect it to be safe. And that means if you're putting stuff on it that is not safe, maybe you should change your business practice. So there are a multitude of regulations. I'm happy to answer questions as much as I can. If you're not members of Cannabis Voice, I invite you to become members, and maybe in the future they can put something together. I would be happy to come and put overheads and break down things so you can see many of the rules and regulations that apply to you as a air quality, water quality, soil, forest, harvesting, food. It is a regulated industry, folks. And we need to get on top of it. The reason why is we want to be poised for when it becomes legalized. And there is every reason to believe that that's soon. And everyone that hasn't made those adjustments, they're going to be behind the eight ball when it happens. So, I could, talk much longer. 15 minutes on here. I'll turn it over. I want to once again thank everyone that has spoken here. I do want to reiterate the comments about community effort. I served as district attorney for 12 years. One of my things, everyone wanted me in my office to solve the problems of this community, no matter what it was. And every time I would tell them, I can't do it alone, folks. Everyone needs to roll up their sleeves and get involved in the solutions to our community. We need to be active participants in our own rescue. And marijuana cultivation, southern part of this county is having profound adverse impacts on our water. And we can choose to not act, whether you're the one pulling the water out or not. You can choose to not act, and you can choose to act. If you choose to not act, there will be a time in the future where you say, if only I had acted, maybe we would still have fish in this river. Maybe this river would still be there instead of looking like the Los Angeles River. That's the story of mankind. All the failures to act, and then later on say we should have done something different. And we are in I don't want to be melodramatic, but we are at a unique opportunity to change what's going on. But it does require everyone's participation, and reach out to your neighbors and talk to your neighbors and let them know, hey, I know what you're doing. Come on, shape up. Let's do this right. Let's do it responsibly. And let's make this an industry that we can all be proud of, as opposed to an industry that really, like any industry that is irresponsible, is an industry that we're ashamed of. So I've spoken enough. Thank you very much.
So we do the Commission on Marijuana Policy. So we're about to begin close to the question and answer section here, the forum as I'll call it, but I wanted to make a quick change to the agenda. I don't sit on any boards, but I'm going to make a motion to add a farmer distinct. Can I get somebody to second that motion? I've got a couple of, if I can introduce a board member and small farmer himself, Mr. Patrick Murphy, come down. Some of you know him.
I just wanted to get up here and thank you for coming down here on the 1-year anniversary. 1 year ago, every single media outlet that produced a story about the cannabis industry in Humboldt County, it was negative. They were calling us environmental terrorists. They were telling us that we were greedy. They were saying that we wouldn't show up and solve the problems that our industry had brought. That's no longer true. We are showing them, we are no longer allowing other people to write the narrative of who we are as a culture or who we are as a people. And that's because we have groups of people showing up in rooms like this tonight who are showing up and also showing Humboldt County, but not just Humboldt County. We're showing Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom who we are as people. You very clearly heard him say, we will not let you write this out. So they have started to listen to you. They're listening at a state level. Recently, Isaiah O'Donnell and I went up to Oregon with Congressman Earl Blumenauer. He's listening up there. He wants to see this draft. He wants to know how Oregon and California can build salmon-safe farms. Because from a farmer's perspective, following the rules is important because that's our brand. The environment is our brand. And so if we take care of our brand will take care of us. And so when you're stepping forward and you're following the rules, that's because you want Humboldt to be known as a salmon-safe cannabis community. They're building factories everywhere else. We're building farms, and we're not just building 5 of them. We're building a network of small farmers so that we can share the wealth so that everybody can get a piece. And that's what Humboldt's about. I want to get into a little bit of my personal relationship with each of these individuals. Praj White, this would not be happening without him. He has been on our policy committee. He has been absolutely integral in making the connections between the different agencies. This has been very hard to walk out into farming communities and ask them to permit their farms. We know why people moved here 50 years ago. They moved to check out so that they didn't have to plug in. And we understand that. But the reason why you need to plug in now is we're not just protecting our watersheds. We're not just protecting our way of life. You know, this is our community. This is our heritage. If you want your heritage to be go away, be bygone because there's a lot of corporate interests that come in here and give us minimum wage jobs, or do you want a lot of spread out wealth that we took before regulation came on a state level? We stood up and regulated ourselves. We stood up and said, you know, we're different. We're going to make this happen. You're the heart and soul of the cannabis industry. You're also the brain, the intellectual property, and that's why in Sacramento they're looking north for the answers. And that's because the answers lie here. You are the absolute standard of the cannabis industry. Whatever California does, the rest of the country will look to. And so it's quite possible that the local ordinance here will end up being a part of the statewide legislation, which will end up being part of the national legislation. And that's how it should. Connor McAfee is not just somebody that I work with, he's my friend. He's an athlete. Where Connor's from in Minnesota, the whole southwest section of that state is no longer drinkable or fishable, and that's because of agricultural runoff. When he told me that story the first time, I understood why it was that Connor had stood up to be involved in this. It's because unregulated agriculture, it's not just time for Humboldt to think about how we use water. And it's time for everybody in the state of California, no matter what agricultural commodity you use, it's time for you to rethink that. If we're asking our farmers to build rainwater catchments, maybe down in the Central Valley they should be thinking about building rainwater catchments. Maybe down in LA they should be thinking about building rainwater catchments. Connor cares deeply about this issue. Connor is welcome on my property. Anybody from any agency in Humboldt is welcome on my property at any time. I've been an outlaw my whole entire life, but I'm not going to die an outlaw. I'm going to die a farmer, and I'm going to die very proud of what I do. Richard Marks is my boss, and probably you would find that. I think that Richard Marks has stepped in and he has corralled a group of people who are very difficult to corral. And he has done an excellent job, and I really want to give props to Richard Marks because he has been patient and he has guided us. I appreciate you, Richard, I really do. Everything that we are and everything that we're at right now, I really want to give you the dividend. Paul and I are on a first name basis because as DA, Paul spent some time chasing me and I didn't run fast enough. Paul is somebody I respect. Paul is somebody who had the courage as a DA to step forward and ask for these same regulations that now we are putting forward. He was talking about this 8 years ago. He was talking about finding a roadmap to distinguish who's a good farmer, who's a bad farmer. If you have a problem with law enforcement in this area or the DA in this area, just go down to Fresno and listen to how they talk down there. It's a gateway drug. I have thought that they were going to start telling me that I was going to become a homosexual or date minorities if I smoked this. By the way, both of those practices are completely good, and that's great. But it's not acceptable for people to reiterate reefer madness. You didn't have a DA who did that. You had a DA who was fair-handed and even and treated people. If you were a nonviolent offender, Paul Gallegos treated you right. He deserves credit for moving this forward, and I want you to give him a round of applause for that. We're releasing this to our board, and very soon here, we are going to need a huge surge of energy from our community. This is the right thing to do. We are going to be releasing it for 1 month, public review. This will be the agencies and yourself. And your direct feedback will go directly to the lawyers that helped us write this, so your voice will be heard. But this is about having your voice heard on a state level and on a national level. You've heard a lot lately about politicians coming up here and taking farm tours and seeing who it is. Who are we? Are we gun-toting thugs? No, we're not. We're farmers. We're the absolute backbone of this community. We're the future board of supervisors. We're the future planning department. We're the future, This has always been about forming a partnership, and an unlikely one, but between cannabis farmers and law enforcement, environmentalists and business leaders, elected officials, and our state agencies. This group of people I am so proud to have worked with because we are forming those bonds that are necessary to have the community that you want. We're going to make this happen, and the push, as hard as it has been to get here, the hardest work is to come. We need energy, we need fundraising, we need absolute focus from our community to come out and show who we are. As of the 1st of next year, I would like it if there were no more raids, except for the worst. There's a big line. Trespass grows, there will never be a permit for that, okay? National Forest grows, never be a permit for that. On private property, if you're a good steward of your land, if you're storing your water in the winter and you're using that same water for your crop in the summer, that's something that doesn't exist in the rest of the state. You should be rewarded with that. You want to know what you get? You have to pay taxes like everybody else. You get a business license. You want to know what you also get? Napa County has a really robust industry. It's a great one, the wine industry. I like to go down there with my wife, who is in the back, who is, by the way, one of the finest farmers that I know, Tanya Baker. Raise your hand. You go down to Napa County, what do you get? You get great schools, low crime rates, a really high quality of life. You know what? They have a really great industry down there. We've been saying it's $4 billion. I believe the State Board of Equalization thinks it might be more. We might be twice their industry down there. Now, what do we get for it? Poor schools, a high crime rate. You know, and although this is the most beautiful place in the world to live, we do not have an industry or communities that match that beauty. And until we do, California Cannabis Voice and our community needs to work hard to make sure that that happens. The difference between those two is we don't have regulation. We just need to regulate this in everybody's life, including those who do not have anything to do with the cannabis industry. Their lives will be enriched by this industry being there. If you meet people who do not agree with what we're doing, do not walk away from them. Do not speak out in anger. Listen to what they have to say. Talk to them. Let them know that the cannabis community cares deeply about their lives being better, not just our own. We are not greedy people. We want this whole area to be better. And that's what I want people to come away with. I'm proud to be a farmer. I love cannabis, and I absolutely love the people that surround it. And I'm just really proud to be standing in a room with all of you tonight speaking about this, including this panel. So thank you very much for showing up.
Trouble now. Luke Bruder, CCVH.
I'll be very brief. There's only one thing I'd like to say besides thank you. That among all the praises,
Thank you.
good. Okay. Among all the praises we have sung, especially the dizzying heights that we've reached with the Board of Equalization and Jared Huffman and Lieutenant Governor. Besides our local supervisors who have done a great job, especially Ryan and Estelle, in really helping push this matter forward, there's two particular individuals that are elected officials that we would be unfair if we did not point them out today. There are two individuals that have carried water for us as a community, and two individuals that stood up on the same day on the floor of the California Senate and the floor of the California Assembly and made succinct statements and said, those cannabis farmers, those are my constituents, and I'm going to fight for them because that's my job. And that's Jim Wood and Mike McGuire. Yeah. We have... You folks have to understand, we have two freshmen, a senator and assemblyman. They've just been, inaugurated. They've just entered office. They recognized this was an issue. I think we drove about 400 phone calls to Mike McGuire's office one day. That was the first time his office had ever gotten inundated with phone calls. They both introduced legislation on this matter to address it, to take care of farmers, to ensure that we're able to do this and get licenses and permits. And then with Mike McGuire, visionary legislation to propose an alternative for industry-wide legislation. Those are big things. It doesn't seem like much.
If somebody has questions, raise your hand, and then we can start the Q&A here. We'll do a little bit. We've got Julio, NPC, and Josh Dunn performing for us later. We're really looking forward to that. So we have a panel up here. Anybody have a first question? Anybody feeling like anybody here in the hot seat? Mr. Andre.
All right. My name is Andre Carey. I'm actually president of California Cannabis Voice Humboldt. I'd like to ask Richard if he can give us kind of a brief overview of what we might see with the upcoming draft.
Well, of course, the next draft is going to be come forward. We've had numerous drafts that have went out to the public, and we've had people who have put a lot of input and had some concerns, and so we tried to address all the concerns that we could. And we do have a document that is going to be probably over 60 pages long, and that's because we're trying to make sure that we are able to pass the litmus test. And we have counsel from Sacramento, Nossman is doing the actual initiative draft ordinance. And we should have that, of course, we're rolling out this next month. And then what will happen with that process is we're going to need to rally our people who want to help in the community. And we're going to need a lot of help by volunteers to get signatures to show a good faith to the Board of Supervisors that the public really would like this moving forward. And it's probably going to be, we'll probably have to have about 8,000 signatures to bring forward with the initiative to show them that the public wants this. Then the Board of Supervisors can make a decision there. If they know that the public is behind this, they can adopt that ordinance as written, and then it'll become into effect with, not too long after that. In the worst case scenario, we'll have to take it to an election next June of 2016, and we would rather that not happen. But I think we have the support of the Board of Supervisors to actually move it forward. And I'm pretty confident. If they've seen the overwhelming community positive, and people are just being great in this process. So I'm pretty comfortable that once we get something written, I wanted it a little bit sooner, but it's as long as it's done right. And that's what our council from Sacramento, they wanted to make sure they didn't mess it up, because they know how many different counties are looking at our document here in the near future. And of course, they know they've already been told, of other agencies all over California that want to take a look at this. But one thing I'd like to mention, our office is in the Prosperity Center for Humboldt County. And so I get traffic of people who are the movers and the shakers. The Prosperity Center is the economic driver of Humboldt County. And to be honest with you, when I first started with California Cannabis Voice, there was a lot of paranoia in that office. But after they've seen our processes and watching people like Patrick speak, it changed their mind about what's going on. And now they've been talking to other people around, different counties in Humboldt, rather than just Humboldt. And of course, they're waiting to see our next draft. But like I said, this is a movement. This happened and would have happened without, me. I was just fortunate to be at the right place at the right time, and I got a great board. I can't say enough for the California Cannabis Voice board. They're all hard workers, and they're all trying to do what's right. And I know Patrick says I'm usually patient with them. I thought I was kind of impatient with them. But they've been great. They all work together hard. They do have disagreements, but I can't tell you, I belong to plenty of boards. Like I said, I'm the president of Mad River Softball, but I'm also on NorCal Umpires. I'm with the Humboldt Domestic Violence Services and different things. I have never seen a board work so hard and so diligently. I'm very fortunate to be part of this movement.
And do we have more questions? By the way, we're working on the sound issue, so we may actually have a microphone functional here in a little bit. But in the meantime, we keep rolling. Any further questions for anybody here on the panel? Just raise your hand if you got a question. And you can also probably corner some of these folks later tonight, maybe buy them a drink, and they'll be happy to answer more questions for you. Maybe the more drinks you buy, the more questions they'll answer for you. But in the meantime, since you got them on the hot seat, I'll give anybody a couple seconds. Any more questions?
I have one.
Oh, sorry.
For the water board, do you know if they are considering changing the square footage on the tiers based off of the input before they put the waiver out?
There have been several comments related to square footage, and that is an issue that we will be considering as part of the rework. Does that answer your question?
My questions are, what is the class 1, 2, the stream, and the 200-foot buffer, and how those relate?
Sure.
Just one.
So class 1 stream is a stream that flows year-round, doesn't go dry, and has fish in it. Class 2 stream is wet for the majority of the year, but can go dry in some cases. Provides some spawning habitat for fisheries. It also provides habitat for other aquatic species, amphibians, etc. Class 3 is an intermittent stream. It's going to be kind of like the headwaters of streams. It has water in it during the wet months, and it generally speaking goes dry in the summertime. It provides habitat for some other aquatic species like benthic macroinvertebrates will be found in some of those intermittent streams, as well as some vernal pools for some amphibians.
So the class 3 stream require 200 foot buffer?
In tier 1, there will be a 200-foot buffer for any level of stream. So that's if you're the low threat to water quality. And the reason that we have tier 1 there is because you're kind of going above and beyond what the average would be, what is kind of necessary. You're really being really protective. There's several, so as we determined kind of that width, the protective buffer widths, looked at something like 50 or so different studies to try and get at some sort of a number. We chose an easier path of just a standard number for across the board. There's a variety of different methods that you can use to determine protective buffer widths. The one that we chose was a standard one. We thought that it would be the easiest to be able to implement. The 200 foot is for tier 1 across the board. Tier 2, so if you don't fit into the low threat to water quality, then that's part of your plan is talking about where your buffer line is going to be. And for tier 2, we would like to see them within not within 100 feet of class 1 and 2 streams, and not within 50 feet of a class 3 stream. So again, 200 feet across the board for tier 1, 100 feet for class 1 and 2, and 50 feet for class 3 if you're in tier 2. Does that answer your question?
And I would just add to that those are slope distances across the slope, not horizontal distances. And the definitions of class 1, 2, and 3 are also in the waiver.
Or what?
Or in the draft permit. If you'd like to see the definition of those.
Okay, so if you're in class or tier 2, you don't have to be 200 feet away from a class 3.
That's correct.
It just puts you in a higher tier.
Correct, and there's just a couple more things that we're requiring of you. It's not saying that you can't cultivate. It's not, being in tier 2 is not a bad thing. So it's not a be-all, end-all to have to be in tier 1. It's, tier 2 is something we expect to see many individuals to be in tier 2, and it's not a bad thing. Kind of the place that you don't really want to be is tier 3. That's where and there's a pathway to get out of tier 3, and that's not an end all for what you're doing either. There's things that need to be cleaned up in tier 3, but being in tier 2 is, it will happen, and it's fine.
Could I just add to that part of the purpose of the Water Resource Protection Plan under Tier 2 is to address how it is if you have smaller vegetative buffers, you're a bit closer to the stream, or you have some tricky site conditions, you develop a site-specific plan to ensure that you're mitigating those factors. You're doing things to, if you're closer, it's not feasible to move your scene, you take measures to make sure that you're not having polluted runoff entering the streams. That's the purpose of the Water Resource Protection Plan.
That clarifies a lot.
Great.
My second part is, I just went through all my water. Now you guys are proposing May 15th as a storage date. I wonder why May 15th, it seems very early, extremely early. And also, are you going to apply this 6 gallons of plant requirement for forbearance from May 15th all the way through October?
The way that map works out, will require no count.
Well, under Tier 1, that is no surface water diversion between May 15th and October 31st. Regardless of your use, how much you put on each particular plant, that's up to you. But it's no surface water diversion during that time. That's for Tier 1. Under Tier 2, you also, in your water resource protection plan, you also need to demonstrate, have a plan in place for your water use and your water conservation measures to ensure that you're not drying up the stream, you're leaving enough in there for the fish and the wildlife and the downstream uses. And that may involve, under Tier 2, it may involve no surface water diversion. It may involve a local watershed plan that has some other, watershed-specific flow plan developed, which is a great thing to do to get together with your neighbors. If there's not a lot of straws in the creek, maybe not everyone needs to remove their surface water diversions in the summertime. But if there's a lot of straws in the creek, that's probably the way to go. So that's one piece. There's different agencies have different jurisdictions. Water rights, and they permit storage and cover surface water diversions. Department of Fish and Wildlife, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, they put conditions on those storage and diversions, so they may have something different. But for our order and our permit, that's kind of how it lays out.
My question is, you're basically going to trump their rules.
No, we don't trump their rules, and we have our own rules. These are the ones we're laying out for us. It doesn't preclude you from needing to get permits from them or needing to meet those rules, but we do have resources, we have resource protection in common, clearly. So there's going to be some overlap. What you do for us likely will go a long ways for them, but you likely need permits from them too.
So I've already got all their equipment.
Good.
And it's, I've gone through the whole process with scientists and with them based on July 15th there. To take that forbearance and bring it back for 2-3 months would require a tremendous more amount of work. And I'm just wondering if you realize the burden you're putting by moving the date back on individual farmers not do that infrastructure.
So to answer that, that would be maybe a place where having the water resource protection plan, and you have that explanation that you have adequate storage for July 15th moving forward, and that would fall maybe into a Tier 2 category, where having that explanation in the water resource protection plan showing that you are still protecting beneficial uses and you've got a shortened forbearance period, that would be, and then that would be somewhere where you could live in Tier 2, and that would be an acceptable framework for your water resource protection plan. We are not, in the end, we are not requiring every single individual to forbear, or not, well, it's not, I'm not using the word forbear. It's no surface water diversions. We're not saying that nobody can from May 15th going forward in order to cultivate. It is saying that if you want to be in Tier 1, that's the framework that you're going from. And if you're in Tier 2, having a situation like what you're describing could fall into that resource protection plan, and it could very well be acceptable for us in looking at that plan to be in Tier 2. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the question, Sequoia.
Actually, if I may just... Sure. I don't mean to provoke you, but it is, I understand the cost that you're talking about, but losing our rivers and streams and the life that lives in them is a terrible price for everyone else to pay because people want to cultivate marijuana. So there are costs that are being borne across the board. And what the regulations are intended to do is to put those costs on the person that's engaged in the activity as opposed to everyone else. But I do understand that there is a cost
I totally agree. And I've been taking steps towards this for years. I've convinced a lot of my neighbors to do this too, but and it takes time, it takes money. I've been doing that. There's a lot of people who haven't started. So if you set up rules that are undoable, that's what I was concerned about. They totally clarified in Tier 2 allows land to be developed.
No, I appreciate that too. So
I wanted to add a touch to that, you know, the idea of Tier 1 is kind of a, let's just call it more of a perfect scenario, and that under the Tier 2 and the water use, that as we as a community in the North Coast start to collect facts and understanding of the various watersheds, it ultimately should be you and your neighbors in the watershed understanding that you're in a drought year and it's a critical period, and you should be prepared to either grow less or store more early. And that ultimately it should be that there are stream gauges within the watersheds that get set up so that everybody in that watershed understands when the stream flow drops below a certain point, there should be no more diversion, and that you preparing for that. So I am dealing with this all the time and setting folks up with the water rights and where it goes, and it's ultimately, you know, there's not enough information yet in these watersheds, and part of what the Cannabis Voice and the ordinance and where this needs to go is people working together within the watershed and understanding the sensitivity they have in their particular area. And there may be some watershed around the county that has water in the surface water diversions that's acceptable to go to July 15th. But there are other watersheds where that's really not acceptable. And it's a matter of how many people are there. So ultimately, this is going to develop and become customized to the watershed you're in, and hopefully the information with you and your neighbors will develop to the high level of intelligence that you look out and see when it's time to do your diversion and when it's not.
Thanks, Paul.
One last comment on that.
Sure, and then we'll get to Sequoia, who's been very patient over this.
At the regional board, this idea of getting together in a watershed group, we've got an initiative in our office, our stewardship program. We're here to help promote watershed groups and coordination. We have models and tools to help. Chances of getting grants are much better if you're grouped up, individuals. It's very hard to get grants. That's something I'm hoping to be working on in this program. And so get together as a group, get good data, and coordinate your pumping schedule and when you all stop diverting if that's appropriate.
That works. Nothing.
My first question is the discharge program. So if you don't have any cultivation or discharge happening within 200 feet, you need to enroll in it. Just automatically need to appear. I think this one's safe.
Yeah, if you are cultivating, the order says more than 6 mature plants or 12 immature plants, then this order applies to you and enrollment is required.
Okay, and then is a spring that's on your property that doesn't flow off of your property considered surface water?
That is, if surface water, if it's a spring and doesn't connect to downstream surface waters, actually sinks back into the ground, then that's not the jurisdiction of the Division of Water Rights or CDFW. But that's a real touchy area and you might want to be real sure about that.
And then I just want to, I'm really curious to learn more about the watershed organization information you guys have.
Cool, maybe we can talk afterwards.
Yeah, and just so that you know, as far as springs kind of being like not going off your property, oftentimes they will go subsurface and then kind of pop back up as what would appear to be a different spring, but it would still be connected hydrologically as far as we're concerned. And so when she says be careful, like really make sure that you understand that, potentially get an assessment as to whether or not that is hydrologically connected. A licensed professional. You could have us come out and do an assessment as it as well. I mean, that's, you know, if you If you want to have the state agency come out, we can come out and make that assessment. We have licensed professionals that work within our agency as well that can make those assessments. If you don't want to have a consulting firm come and do it. So, public servant, right?
We have a couple minutes left, so yes.
Is the council addressing indoor cultivation? And if so, how do I learn about what your concepts are and what you're addressing? And looking at it.
Is that for Richard?
Who's that for?
I've just heard a lot about outdoor and water. But when you guys build the ordinance, are you guys going to be addressing indoor cultivation?
What was that again? Are we addressing indoor?
Yes.
No, we aren't.
Not at all.
That will come in the future, but on the original one, no.
As you write it up, it's like, there's a number of different things. We'll be addressing transportation, manufacturing, all the full gamut. But this is the main focus right now. I understand. So,
Yeah. This is considered a land use ordinance.
I want to thank Board President Andre for jumping in there.
sorry.
Ben, go for it. We got time for a couple more questions if anybody's got them. And we want to thank Eric in the back for helping with some of the sound issues. I appreciate it. Not so weird back any left. Yes.
So like forestry practices seem to say a 30-foot buffer for class 3, is my understanding. But just the 50-foot, like, just wondering if that can be changed.
So, forest practices are regulated by the Board of Forestry and the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, CAL FIRE. The Regional Water Board does participate in those reviews and for conformance with the Basin Plan and Water Code. And in some instances, the forest practice rules are adequate, and others they're not. They are considered minimums, and oftentimes it's necessary to go above and beyond those. And I would offer that there's a lot of sediment and temperature impairments in our region, and those regulations have been in place for a long time. So we're trying to adapt and improve how we do our stream protections.
And to add on to that, depending on which piece of that you're looking at, the forest practice rules can be less protective than what we're proposing, and in some of the cases, it's actually the forest practice rules are more protective. In particular, when you're looking at a class 1 stream on a slightly steeper slope, if you compare Tier 2, where we're only saying 100 feet, it goes up to 150 feet of protection for forestry in some cases. And on top of that, cannabis cultivation, like cultivation in general, agricultural cultivation requires heavier use of pesticides and fertilizers than forestry does. And so there's different parameters that we're looking at as far as having to protect water quality and what the buffer is working towards. So, what a buffer needs in when you're looking at land use in regards to forestry practices is not identical to agriculture. You can't, if they are similar in that it is on the landscape, but it's not necessarily comparing apples to apples. Does that make sense?
If you're taking a bulldozer and moving on dirt within 30 feet of a class 3, I feel like that's similar.
That's part of it, but there's more ongoing concerns. There's concerns of fertilizer application, and how is that infiltrating into the soil, and how is that moving through our waters. And so there's going to be different parameters, different requirements based on nutrient application that you're not necessarily going to have with the timber industry, right? So there's just
downstream, like you're taking a 30-foot buffer that could be like horizontally away from and all that water's going to flow down this way. So if you got a class 3 running right through a piece of land coming down, and you're saying you get a 50-foot buffer, I think you're taking away a lot of safety that is perfectly good to use.
Thank you for your opinion on that. And you might note under Tier 2 in the waiver, in the draft waiver, it calls for minimum setbacks that Connor mentioned. And there's also a provision that you can go through an extra hoop and propose something smaller, but you have to go through the extra hoop of getting special approval from our executive officer. And so we weigh those on a case-by-case basis and hope that those cases are rare.
We have time for about one more question, if anybody's got one.
I'll just put it out there, Mr. Gallego.
Sequoia?
How soon do you foresee cannabis being agriculture in the state of California? When will it be a crop?
It already is.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball. I would like to think that there will certainly be at least one, if not several, propositions coming up soon regarding legalization of marijuana. Once that's legalized, depending on how that legalization is framed or put in place, it could have, I'm not sure exactly your question, but it could have vast impacts on marijuana to be cultivated all over the state of California.
Does it take that legislation to recognize it as a crop?
I think the legislation is intended to legalize it, which will make it a crop that can be cultivated throughout the state of California. So that's sort of the answer. And I would love to tell you it will be legalized in 2016. It's just...
Does it take legalization to make it a crop?
Well, it is a crop by definition in and of itself. The question is whether it's legal to cultivate it. And so it already is a crop, it already is an industry. The question is whether it's legal and whether people can engage in that without the risk of prosecution or, more importantly, I would think, being able to get the protections of our laws and utilize our courts to enforce contracts for people that they make agreements with that don't actually produce, and all the other things that people engaged in this industry have to deal with regularly. So legalization will pave the way to an industry that's recognized by the state, gets the protections of our courts, gets the protections of law enforcement, fire departments, everyone else, and also has the responsibility of complying with all the regs and taxation. I'm not sure if I've answered your question. I hope I have. Yes, no?
Kind of. It seems like it's legal medicine, like a medical crop, or medically it's not legal medical cannabis crop.
Well, the law does allow, the medical marijuana program I did allow for cooperatives and collectives. Collectives are not defined in California law, cooperatives are. That's a corporate status that's defined in the Corporations Court Code. People can form cooperatives. They are required to become incorporated. But there are all sorts of other things they have to do associated with that. Every member of that cooperative has to be a patient or a caregiver as provided by the law. That's very express. You can't just have someone that is growing there that's not a patient or a caregiver. That is sort of what regulates it. The problem is that even when people are trying to comply with the law, they form cooperatives, and they're doing all the steps that they think are required by the law. They may not get prosecuted in Humboldt County, but they will get prosecuted in Trinity County or Mendo, or where there's this patchwork quilt of enforcement and of commitment to depriving those people of the protections of laws or giving them the protection of the law. So it's only legalization that will get rid of that patchwork quilt, which will provide at least as close as we can get to equal protection of the law to those people. And it will also free up the industry so that people that aren't patients or caregivers can get involved in it and help to produce that product for people that aren't just patients and caregivers. Does that answer your question? All right, fair enough. I'm happy to talk afterwards, too.
Yeah, so that's going to wrap up. I want to thank the panel very much, and thank you guys for the questions. We'd like to give a round of applause for everyone on the panel. It's people like you that make our job a lot easier, because part of our mission is to help educate and put information out there. Sometimes information that we don't necessarily have ourselves. So to have, if I may, experts like this to join us makes the community a lot stronger. So thanks again for joining us. And I want to thank you all for coming out and supporting and celebrating with us here. We've got more. We got music. coming your way here very shortly, which is why we're going to cut it off. But feel free to pick their brains privately. Richard, I know tequila shots are his preferred method of bribery. But for the folks that are going to run away, feel free to ask them more questions. And thanks again. It's been a pleasure. And thanks for supporting local farmers. And happy birthday. Thanks, everybody.